When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about the best chapter from every book in A Song of Ice and Fire. Not talking about the lore ones. I guess I could do the lore if you guys wanted in a follow-up video, but I'm just talking about the main 5 books. Now, when I went into making this video, I thought, this might actually kind of be hard, you know, picking my favorite chapter or what I consider, I guess, the best chapter of each book. Then I really thought about it, and it became clear that, at least for the first 4 books, there is a distinct chapter for me that stands out as my favorite to read, or the favorite or best chapter for each book. But for one of them, A Dance with Dragons, a chapter didn't really come to mind. You know, a lot of different ones were kind of there, but there was no one that really stuck out until I really thought about it and processed it. So as we go through this video, let me know what is your favorite chapter from each one of the books and why you think so. So going into A Game of Thrones, I think this one, I talked about this chapter a lot because we got done with the Game of Thrones, you know, chapter rereads and all of that, and this was clearly the best chapter. It was Dany 10, A Game of Thrones, or the last chapter of the book. The chapter where Daenerys basically resurrects the dragons. It's this great chapter where in the beginning of it, it's all about Daenerys questioning if she's going mad on the actions she's going to do, 'cause she's going to, walk into this funeral pyre, try to resurrect the dragons, try to bring the dragons back into the world, something that's, not been done, and there haven't been dragons for over 100 years at this point. And I love the way that this arc concludes not only Daenerys' story in this book, but also concludes the story of A Game of Thrones really well. And I think, to me, it's just the standout chapter. It just has the biggest moment, the biggest payoff. It's just a beautiful way of, in my opinion, concluding what I think is honestly almost my favorite POV of Game of Thrones. It's her and Ned really just tied for number 1. Going into book 2, A Clash of Kings. Now, I could see this one being a lot more like divisive, or people having a lot more different ideas, because it really depends on who is your favorite character and what do you value the most in this story. And for me, it definitely has to be Catelyn 3. Again, Catelyn 3, if you don't know what that is, it doesn't instantly, draw anything. You don't instantly recognize what chapter that is. That chapter is the Renly's Peach chapter. So it's the chapter where you have Catelyn, Renly, and Stannis. And it's basically about their conversation, their meeting. And I just find this chapter to be so great, because what the prologue of A Clash of Kings does is it kind of gives us all the background that you need for the character of Stannis and how he feels about Renly. And then it takes it and it kind of ups it again, right? You get to this point where Renly, and Stannis, they're going back and forth, trading jests and all this stuff and making each other mad. But you have Renly who offers this peach, and Stannis instantly thinks that it's a slight, that he was drawing for a sword, but no, Renly was looking for a peach, because it shows the differences between the two characters, that Renly is all about, the pleasantries and all these things, where Stannis is about doing his duty. And so it points out Stannis' biggest character flaw, and it's something that Stannis, in his own words, is haunted by. The thought of, he doesn't have really any happiness or pleasantness in his life, right? His marriage isn't great. He's very broody. He doesn't enjoy laughing, any of those things. He's deeply hurt by some of the traumas of his younger years, with like his parents dying. All of that comes to the forefront here. It's also the first time we really get to see Storm's End in the book. It's also another great part to open the chapter with. It just paints Stannis and who Renly are so well, while us, the reader, we're put in the shoes of Catelyn, where we see the reasonable thing to do is for Renly and Stannis to team up to beat the Lannisters instead of fighting each other. And so George does a great way of putting us into the chapter, but feeling helpless as Stannis and Renly are going to go at it no matter what Catelyn says. And so I love this chapter because it really is, in my opinion, A Clash of Kings is my favorite book, and Renly's Peach's chapter really tells you why I like the book so much, because of what it does for a character like Stannis. And Stannis is so interesting because, unlike, book 1, say, with Ned, we have Ned basically, for the first 3/4 of the book, Ned is basically every 3 to 4 chapters. Stannis is a character that we're not really with that much. We're with characters around him, or we're hearing what people think of him from other people. And so I really do love this chapter, and I think it's, has a really big place in my heart in the series and where I enjoy it. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, because I don't think everybody's gonna have that as their number 1 in this book. A lot of people might have some of the stuff, in the Battle of the Blackwaters. A lot of people love Tyrion stuff. I love Tyrion stuff as well. Just a lot of like areas that you could choose. Now, moving into book 3 of Storm of Swords. I know there's a lot of great chapters in this book. There's a lot of fan favorite chapters. Most of the huge payoffs of the first 3 books happen in this book, so you could pick a number of chapters. I mean, just to throw some out there, you could pick the epilogue of A Storm of Swords. You could pick Jaime when he's at Harrenhal with Brienne. You could choose the Purple Wedding. You could choose Jon in the Battle for the Wall. Like, there's so many different moments that you could pick because of the build-up that actually pays off in this book. And so I personally have always said the Red Wedding is my favorite chapter, really in any book, really. And it's weird because it's like, it's not a great thing that's happening, but it's just so perfectly crafted. I actually read the chapter today. I'm kind of rereading A Storm of Swords on my own time, and I got to the Red Wedding today, and it's just such a great way that George puts you into this horrible wedding that goes terribly wrong, and where, this roller coaster of emotions with Catelyn, as, everything seems to be building up, the tensities of really the last couple of chapters with Arya and Catelyn. It's super tense building up to this moment, and then it all falls apart. And even there's some moments where Catelyn thinks, wait, we might be saved, because she sees, the Bolton men coming in, and again, that turns against her. And watching Robb and Catelyn both die in this chapter, I think it is George's best writing that he's ever done that I've, read in terms of Song of Ice and Fire stuff. I hadn't read some of his other books, things like that, but this is, to me, even if you look at my favorite book is Fellowship of the Ring, Lord of the Rings, but this is my favorite chapter of any book. It's my favorite on-screen moment. I just think the way that George is able to pay off everything that led to this moment, really from the last 2 books, and even, the book itself, A Storm of Swords, pays off here. And in my opinion, the Red Wedding really is the climax of the early, couple books. It's really what everything was leading to, because it has ripple effects and affects every single plot line after it happens. A Feast for Crows, again, this is another one where, if you guys remember my Feast for Crows retrospective series, it's not as in detailed as like my reread, for instance, but it is a series where I went in, talking about a summary, more or less, my overall thoughts of each chapter just briefly, and it stuck out quite obviously. And even before the retrospective, I know this is my favorite and the best chapter for me in Book 4 in A Feast for Crows, but Aeron 2, or the Kingsmoot, to me is the best chapter of the book. I love the way we see all these people putting their claims forward. We're seeing the politics and how people are trying to sway the audience with, whether that's with Asha, whether that's with Victarion, or whether it's Euron coming out of nowhere and stealing basically the crown and the throne for the Iron Islands, and Aeron, having to just sit in dismay. It just works so beautifully because you have all these different type of ideologies, coming in, and it's Euron's winning out. Even though Euron's probably isn't the best for the Iron Islands, it's the way he tactically handles this actual Kingsmoot. And the Kingsmoot really is, in my opinion, the climax, or the big peak of Book 4, where you have this early Greyjoy plotline that kind of reaches this moment, in the first half of the book. It's kind of very much like the Red Wedding in a lot of ways. It's kind of in the, first half of the book, but then a lot of things, happen because of it. So I really personally love Aeron 2, Feast for Crows. It is my favorite chapter of Feast for Crows. Now, getting into A Dance with Dragons. This is one that I kind of mentioned earlier on in the intro of the video, that I didn't know where to go for this, because I thought initially maybe one of the Theon chapters, because I think all the Theon chapters are fantastic. I thought about Asha's chapter where she flees Deepwood Mott, and even some of her stuff with Stannis. I thought about, some of Jon's chapters in the book, even Daenerys, where she's finally able to, tame Drogon and ride him for the first time. There was just so many points that you could have picked in this book of like kind of, higher moments. Not one of them stuck out as being a chapter I really, go towards in terms of my favorite. You could even go towards like something like Young Griff and the Golden Company. I came out of this saying that I came out of this one with Davos 4, I think, being my favorite and best chapter of A Dance with Dragons. Just the fact of, the speech that Wyman Manderley gives, and, the whole building up of Davos's plot, and this recontextualizing of the entire northern plot going on, that Wyman Manderley is, right now much more smart, and he's playing the Game of Thrones, but he's acting like this kind of foolish character to kind of throw people off of his real intentions, and how he's kind of undermining the phrase, and also Roose Bolton. it's this great moment that ties in, again, what I talked about earlier with the Storm of Swords, where, you know, the Red Wedding has these ripple effects that we're still seeing in the story because it's such a pivotal event to the story. And so I think this reveal, what it does and how impactful it is for a reader when you read it for the first time, I think for me it had to be the best chapter of the book. I could see others, and this is the one out of all 5 of them. This is the one where I think there's the most amount of argument that you could sway me off this one, or maybe a certain reread. I have more appreciation for some other chapter than this one. But just based on today, I would say that I found this to be the favorite chapter of A Dance with Dragons. So, but if you guys did enjoy, consider subscribing and liking. And also a thank you to my Patreons as well for supporting me on this channel. If you did want to become one, you get videos early and an exclusive video each week. But thank you guys all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.